Sam. I'm the 9th District Party intern, and for this episode of Candidate Conversations, I am lucky enough to have Cinde Wirth joining us. Cinde is a 7th-generation resident of Bartholomew County and a candidate for Indiana Senate District 44. She is eager to represent her community. Cinde is an expert biologist, archaeologist, and educator who will use her experience to bring about positive change to Indiana as we face both a drastic public health crisis and issues with public education being disrespected in the State House. Not only has Cinde worked as both a scientist and a teacher, she's not new to politics, having served as a science and education expert for the 115th and 16th United States Congresses. She's an expert in writing legislation that crosses partisan lines and improves the lives of all citizens. If elected to the state Senate, Cinde is committed to improving public education, healthcare access for all Hoosiers, bringing about good-paying jobs to Indiana, protecting the environment, and more. Cinde, I'd like to thank you so much for being here today.
Thanks for having me, Sam.
So I always like to start off by asking my guests what inspired you to run for office.
So I'm a scientist, as you said, and I spent 10 years teaching high school science. In the middle of 2017, I was unable to answer the questions of my 17 and 18-year-old students as to why, if we know the science, things seem to be moving backwards, both nationally and in Indiana. So I went looking for answers for them. This led me to apply for a fellowship in Washington, D.C., and I was accepted. So I served as a legislative fellow on Capitol Hill in 2 offices in the U.S. House of Representatives. And I realized while I was there that my experiences and expertise as a scientist and a teacher and a small business owner gave me a wealth of experiences and strengths to draw from that most people don't have. And I can apply that to policymaking to help make people's lives better. I'm an analyst at heart, so I like looking for gaps in things, problems to solve, and ways to do that. And that's scientists coming out of me. But the piece that I really like is that it makes people's lives better. And good policy is a lot like good science. It should be in everyone's best interest, and it should be relatively easy to understand.
That's incredible. And the fact that you were inspired by your students is that warms my heart as a student. So my second question, why do you think that there is so much science denial from Republicans? And when you're in the State House, how are you going to foster a more positive approach to science and get your colleagues to embrace science?
So I think it's not just Republicans. The anti-science thing is inherently largely backed by conservative initiatives. But science has long been demonized as part of a broader anti-intellectualist initiative. If science is promoted to be difficult to understand, most people just stop trying. I saw that in my classroom all the time. Kids would come into beginning biology and say, I can't do this, it's hard. And this was day one. So that was about half of the battle that I spent while teaching was, getting kids to understand that science can be difficult, yes, but it's not impossible. And it's just a myth that it's too hard to understand. So when people are encouraged to give up understanding science, and they do this usually under the guise of it being too difficult and it's just for nerds and all the other stuff that people say, then that opens the door for corporations and wealth-backed special interests to come in and more easily exploit hardworking people. This discourages social mobility and redistribution of wealth. And I say that in terms of people who want to get ahead and do better for themselves are often not encouraged to. So the simple answer for that is it's about money.
That is so interesting. I've never thought about the anti-science movement being part of a broader scheme to manipulate all of us. That is so interesting. And I think that's such an important message that you need to bring to the State House. So my third question, besides the mishandling of the coronavirus pandemic, what do you think is the most important scientific crisis facing Indiana at this moment in time?
So I'm not just a biologist scientist, but I'm also an anthropologist or archaeologist scientist. So I do look at things in maybe a non-traditional way that a lot of just pure hard scientists, biologists, chemists, physicists look at things. So The coronavirus pandemic itself is a serious crisis, and the mishandling of it by politicizing public health and safety measures is unconscionable. I am still in disbelief that that's even occurring. But the pandemic has done something bigger, which it's pulled back the coverings of many aspects that our communities need addressed. Healthcare, childcare, better jobs, better paying jobs. We've already seen a shift in hours that people are working and things closing earlier again, which actually is a health initiative. So it's really strange the way that all of these things overlap. So nothing exists in isolation or in a silo. It's all related. It's like an ecosystem. So part of that, as far as science goes, is the air quality in Indiana. We rank 48th in the nation, depending on which study you look at and what they're actually measuring. This is among the worst in the US. So our environmental practices and our lack of forward-thinking initiatives, such as having a 21st century utility committee in Indiana to look at divesting from fossil fuels and coal-fired power plants, this year is happening 20 years into the 21st century. So science and scientists sounded the warning on this long ago. Indiana's failed to listen. But why? Because we're still favoring profits over people's health and the health of our land, air, and water. So the real scientific crisis in Indiana that I see is that we aren't listening to the scientists. We're marginalizing them and setting them back. And what suffers is our health, the health of our land, the quality of our water, and the quality of our air. So environmental initiatives are paramount to this, but it also has implications in our health. So as I said, it's all related.
That is absolutely so true. And that's something that I felt even as a student in my own student government last year. We had a big initiative to try to get the university to divest from fossil fuels. It was, one, difficult to even get a seat at the table because they thought the idea was so ludicrous, and two, at the end, they just ended up favoring profits over their students that are suffering. So I'm glad that people like you are working to make change at a higher level than just a university. And so
that's exciting for me to hear.
Thank you. And so my final question, since we've been talking about science a lot, moving away from that, as a teacher, why do you think that education hasn't been treated as a priority in the State House, and how do you plan to relay its importance to your colleagues?
So again, we're going to put that dollar sign out front because, and as I taught in my environmental science class, you've got to follow the money. It all goes back to money. So Indiana changed the public school funding formula for the state in 2010, 2011, I think, stripping school districts, especially rural districts, from the money they needed to be able to continue to provide the good quality public education that they had in the past. I'm a product of Indiana public schools. My children are products of Indiana public schools. I taught in our public schools. Our public schools and public school teachers are the foundations of our communities. You can't go in a local community and ask who teachers are and have somebody not answer you. They need to be supported and compensated on par with other states. Every year we lose teachers from schools of education from all of our big universities and small universities to other states because they pay more. So our public schools need to be funded so that they continue to provide an equitable, high quality public education for all Hoosier children. So there are a lot of special interest groups that want to promote what's misnamed as school choice, which actually really isn't even a choice. All it's doing is undermining our public schools. And I feel very strongly that for all children to be able to have a chance to get a good quality education, because not all parents can afford to pay for a private education, that our public schools are the way that we do that. And we have a good track record of great education from our public schools in Indiana.
Absolutely. I am so on board with that. I came from a public school. I learned so much and grew so much from the public schools that I grew up in. And so it's really inspiring to see people like you who you're a public school teacher, you have the experience writing policy for public schools. So you seem like the obvious choice to handle this in our state.
Thank you. It's not where I ever imagined I would end up, but when you get the calling to embark on this, it really is a calling. It is not something you sort of come into lightly. So I really do feel committed to helping make these changes across Indiana, because it is better for, like, good science. It's in everybody's best interest.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, that's all I have for today, but thank you so much for being here. It was so lovely getting to meet you.
Thank you for having me.